Let's be innovative. Let's challenge the norm. Let's raise the bar. Let's be the elite.
Lionheart returns debuting its new championship format. For the first time, Lionheart's best will battle in a multi-class format featuring BMW's all-new M-Hybrid V8 and M4 GT3 machines. 55 drivers will face off in the ultimate test in the ultimate driving machine. 18 races at the world's most demanding road courses where traffic takes on a whole new meaning. This year, Lionheart will crown 2 champions, whose name will be etched into the Lionheart history books. Find out next. The Buttkicker Sportscar Championship, presented by BMW Performance Driving School, starts now. After a momentous visit to the Circuit de la Sarthe, the Buttkicker Sportscar Series heads into the mountains. The main straight here is one of the longest in the world, and it runs 1/3 of the track length. But in those 2/3 lies a contrast of fast high-commitment sweepers and slow technical frustrating corners. Navigating multi-class traffic today cleanly might just result in a trip to HyperX Victory Lane. Welcome to Japan, and welcome to the Gomez Sim Industries Grand Prix of Fuji, presented by Arena TV. Hello everyone and welcome back to RaceSpotTV and coverage of the 2023 Buttkicker Sports Car Series. The run continues with 2-week gaps separating the fields from racing, and we head our way now over to Fuji. My name is Arjuna Kankipati, joined alongside as ever by Andrew Kinsella. Don't forget you can follow along with live timing and scoring by heading to racespot.tv/timing. Let's dive straight into our BMW Performance Driving School pre-race show because, Andrew, 2 races in the previous month at the Circuit de la Sarthe, as well as the Circuit of the Americas, and boy did we have some fun. But now I think we're into what is going to be a very difficult month of July. First here at Fuji, but then in 2 weeks' time we make our way over to the Canadian Tire Motorsports Park.
We've had one eye on this part of the schedule for a while, haven't we, Arjuna? As you say, Fuji here today, but then Mosport in a couple of weeks' time. It's really going to be a special month of July for these drivers. Very difficult, very technical, and really, really fast as well. Can't wait to see what they make of it. And then, of course, I've also got one eye on Monza at the beginning of August as well.
That leads us to the halfway point and into 3 races in August. But yes, I mean, I think we have definitely kept our eyes circled on this when we've been taking a look at this next level racing schedule. Of course, what a back half of the season we've still left for these drivers to go, but with the standings currently shaping up quite interestingly, let's run you down through the BMW Performance Driving School LMDH standings, where now it's just 2 points that splits the Hydra Race Geodesic Racing pair at the front of Austin Young and John Badefer. Let's not forget Marius Valiokas, who's been up there in the mix as well, only 6 points further back. You've got Phil Kraus in fourth, hanging tight as well. And Adam Blocker has reinserted himself into the top 10. We're still very early in this season, Andrew, and given what a chaotic opening 6 rounds it's been, only 1/3 into the season, I think we've still got a long way to go.
Absolutely, we do, and we can't forget that there will be some drop weeks happening as well, so that will mix up the standings a bit as well once we finally get those factored in. So there's still a lot to play for, and you can see that it's really tight, even in that top 5, looking all the way back to Graham Saunders. He's doing a good job hanging in there. If he can get a little bit more consistent, I think he even has a shot at it as well. So it's all still to play for here in the LMDH side of things.
I think you're getting in trouble. You're going to get in trouble, excuse me. Graham Sanders is, I think, the lesson that we learned 2 weeks ago, isn't it?
Yes, I apologize.
Yeah, I'm glad you apologize as well. We'll call each other out early at the start of this one. Let's take a look at the GT3 standings, though. Let's not forget we split them into Pro and Am. It's still Sean Campbell that runs away from the field in the Pro, but Ryan Otis now starts to build a bit of a separation up to Joshua Chin. Andrew Marquez has jumped up into the top 5 in Pro, while meanwhile in Am, James Paulson has dropped from 2nd to 5th. Staples, Malone, and Reagan have all jumped up in his place. However, they're all still, they're only 9 points off the back of Chase Wilson, who continues to be the class of the field in Am.
Yeah, the battles aren't quite as tight on the GT side of things, but Ryan Otis is definitely starting to separate himself just a little bit from Josh Chin. Certainly, if not on pure speed, but just in the consistency of his results. The last few times out, Chin has made a few mistakes, and it's just allowed Otis to get away just a little bit. Question still remains whether he can do anything to really make a dent in Sean Campbell's lead there. But on the AM side of things, we've talked about this before, but because the GT3 side of things has everyone going all for the same points, it looks like it's a big gap, but that can change in a heartbeat. With one really good race from Staples or Malone or Reagan, they could put them right back up in contention with Chase Wilson.
And we've already seen that Wilson's not been absolutely perfect. Here's a look at the HyperX Team Championship, by the way, where in GT3s we combine them into Pro and Am and mishmash them into one, where in the LMDH they run as they were. Still a big lead at the front for Hydra Race Geodesic Racing over Synergy Levois Motorsports in that LMDH class, but Powerslide Motorsports now only 2 points back, continuing to try and close there. Meanwhile, in the GT3, Sean Campbell sits 2nd by himself. I think that goes to show his strength in that Pro Championship. You've got Graphics LC Corbo just 1 point behind, and Matthew Morhart as well as Ryan Otis pairing up quite nicely to be running away at the GT3 Team Championship. Let's talk you through the Gomez Sim Industry Series details in this debut season of the Butt Kicker Sports Car Series, the 10th year of the Lionheart Racing Series. We've got 2 ultimate driving machines, the BMW M Hybrid V8 and the BMW M4 GT3, 2 cars that debuted on the sim before they went out and competed in anger. They're all racing a custom fixed setup built by the Majors Garage as they fight for their share of $18,000, the most notable of which, of course, for 2 champions, the opportunity to head down to Thermal, California and jump behind the wheel of a BMW M4 GT4 at the BMW Performance Driving School. 90-minute time races across the 18 rounds that we have, and live race control, not just there for safety cars potentially, but of course to give some penalties out as well. And so as we talk about your arena track analysis, it's as we head to the land of the rising sun. Initially open not to host road course racing, with which it is now synonymous, instead opened to host oval racing, it's become home to a track known more for unpredictable weather than anything. And I really think, Andrew, that the multi-class madness today, with no chicane to talk about towards the end of the lap, is going to be quite intriguing.
It's definitely going to be intriguing. This track has gone through a number of different iterations, and we have the most recent update of the track here on iRacing, and it does present some unique challenges. All 3 sectors are very, very different. You have a long front straightaway. You have a really fast flowing first sector, and then that final sector, so technical. It's going to be a real challenge for these drivers, and I expect to see some very interesting strategies in terms of how the LMDHs are going to negotiate that traffic.
Yeah, not sure how big a window we truly have, but we're indicated LMDH to take force highs at both stops. GT3, we'll see how it plays out with a pit lane delta, not including stop time, of about 27 seconds. Drivers out on track for their solo qualifying session. They get the track to themselves, and just 4 laps, and most of them heading into their final laps. We'll take the time to quickly thank those that make all this possible, starting with HyperX. The Lionheart Racing Series is powered by HyperX, makers of premier gaming gear like the legendary ultra-comfortable Cloud line of gaming headsets. Whatever you play, however you play, HyperX knows we're all gamers. For more information on HyperX products, visit hyperx.com. You're passionate about sim racing, but it always feels a little flat compared to the feeling of driving a real car. Butt kicker haptic hardware and software are easy to install and let you feel every bump in the track, slip of your tire, and engine redline. The tactile feedback is so accurate and realistic, you'll be driving faster and having more fun than ever before. Visit thebuttkicker.com. If you think sim racing is thrilling, try getting behind the wheel of a real race car. The BMW M4 GT4 experience at the BMW Performance Driving School in Thermal, California puts you in the cockpit of one of BMW's fastest cars, complete with roll cage and racing slicks. You'll get fitted with a racing suit, practice pit stops, and lap their track with pro instructors. Nothing virtual about the thrills. To book your M4 GT4 experience, call or visit the links on screen. Next Level Racing is an industry-leading cockpit and motion simulator manufacturer devoted to creating the most immersive experience possible for the global sim racing community. Take your racing to the next level and visit nextlevelracing.com. Gomez Sim Industry are makers of high-end esports equipment and controls, precision-built using nothing but the best materials available today. Passion and handmade craftsmanship drive each made-to-order build, creating a driving experience like no other. Visit GomezSimIndustries.com. Arena is an all-new esports streaming experience driven by real-time fan interaction between gamers and their communities. Arena brings live broadcast fan engagement to the next level. Get involved and make a difference on arena.tv. From simple logos to full branding for your company, virtual designs, deliveries raced by Indy 500 champions. Graphics offers the finest quality with a wide range of design services. Visit graphicsesports.com. I think we're mostly done and dusted. Right now in qualifying, a handful of drivers still out there and circulating. I think more getting practice under the belt than anything. It is Graham Sanders that sits at the top with a 122.428, at least in your LMDH class. Meanwhile, in the GT3s, it is Sean Campbell with a 134.767 that once again has set the benchmark. But I think more curiously than anything, Andrew, it's only by 0.3 of a second.
It's incredibly tight in both classes, tighter than we've seen in a while, with Miguel Vigo really starting to put some pressure. Ryan Otis also looking really fast here so far. I think the shock for me is that Josh Chin is almost half a second back down in the GT3 class, but yeah, there's definitely going to be a little bit of competition here, and we talked about that long straightaway. The draft is going to come into effect. I don't think that Sean Campbell's going to have quite the cakewalk that he's had in the past. Yep,
it's going to be interesting as well. I don't know what the downforce setting is for these GT3 rear wings, but going to be quite intrigued as to how much draft is going to play a factor. Christopher Hill jumps up to 6th in the 101. That's 7/10 off of provisional pole. We'll see Eric Staropoli come towards the line for what will be his final attempt in qualifying. 35.5, the previous best. Well, he's consistent, but no improvement.
Yeah, but that consistency will serve him well in the race. You really need to be able to put in lap after lap here because, again, we talked about how tactical it is. It's so easy to miss your apex just a little bit, and it'll cost you 1 or 2 tenths here or there. And so if he has that consistency now in qualifying, that's going to serve him really well in the race.
Like I mentioned, a bunch of drivers still out there, I think more for practice than anything, but the only two drivers out there with laps that are going to count. One is Andrew Marquez, who we see riding in 10th position. The other one is Travis Jägerlehner, who comes to the line in that Synergy Motorsports car and needs to find a bit more time. He's 0.3 off of his previous best, has still 4 minutes with which to finish 2 flying laps, so he will get some opportunities for improvement. If you're curious, Christopher Hill still does have the chance to improve, but is backed off on this lap, and I think is setting up for what will be his final lap. One thing that I remarked on as I sat down just a moment before we went live, Andrew, is how dark it had gotten in practice. Not the case anymore. It's quite sunny again.
It absolutely is, but this is Fuji, so clouds can roll in at a moment's notice, and we've seen that in the race, or in the real world as well. Unfortunately, we don't have rain in the sim yet, but that will come at one point, and that will definitely play a factor at a track like this. But it's 21 degrees ambient, 24 on track, so it's really pretty cool, really good conditions for racing.
Here comes the 63 to the line, and he'll jump up into 6th spot, displaces Christopher Hill, who, let's not forget, does get his chance to respond. That's Marquez done and dusted for the session. Here is Christopher Hill in the, I don't even know what colors to call it, BMW, but that's it's about as colorful as you can get.
I'll go hot pink and blue, if I'm seeing that right. Maybe a touch of yellow in there as well.
Yeah, I'm trying to. The main blue is, I think, what is throwing me off, because I can't describe it as just a blue. I need to be more descriptive than that, and it's not quite a teal.
How about a deep sea blue?
Deep sea blue is pretty good, I'd say. This is where, by the way, we no longer have the chicane, and instead blast our way through, and now with slightly more speed up in towards the slightly off-camber corner, really enters us into the final sector. It's rather clumsy, this final sector, to be kind.
It is. Well, it's got a lot of decreasing radius corners, so you go in with a ton of speed, and then you have to get your car woed down as you're turning, and it's really, really difficult to negotiate that final sector successfully. So I think that there's going to be a fair bit of different lines that people are going to take there, and I think that there's probably going to be a little bit of calamity as well.
Oh, don't say that. There's going to be 4/10 of an improvement for Christopher Hill, and he'll jump up in front of Joshua Chin and gets up into the top 5, so that's a nice run in qualifying for him. We'll get to see Jägerlehner finish things up, but everyone else watches on. And with the conditions being so cool, with us qualifying in the morning, let's just note that we are going to surely see warmer track temperatures the longer that we go. And like I mentioned slightly earlier, we do expect the LMDHs to take 4 tires when they dive their way down on towards pit road, potentially on both occasions as well. I'm not sure what that necessarily means for the GT3 machines, and given that this is not necessarily a low tire wear track, maybe medium tire wear track, going to be interesting how it plays out. Jägerlehner then, we'll see him run to the line and get us done and dusted with qualifying here in the land of the rising sun. Finds 4/10 of his own, and that should be good enough to jump him up in front of Creighton Carter, but no further. 15th for the 17.
Yeah, not a bad showing for Jägerlehner. He hasn't really shown the speed that we've seen him in other cars in this GT3 quite yet, but he's definitely a driver that I'm watching as the season goes on. I'm expecting him to get a little bit faster the longer that we go on here.
Here we get a look from up above at this Fuji Speedway, and most interestingly at the final sector. You could just see how much it switches back in and on itself. Pit entry, something that we haven't necessarily talked about. We do have 2 attempts at pit entry for the drivers, Andrew, and it's a pit entry that comes with a chicane.
Yeah, it's not necessarily the hardest pit entry that we have on circuit, but it's not the easiest either, and you really do have to push as hard as you can and get yourself woed down basically as late as possible. You can see it's a straight in, but then, as Arjuna said, that chicane, really, really difficult to nail, and it's going to take that in order to have a fast pit time on pit lane.
We're ready to rumble then with the first third of the season done. We now head into that second third where drivers surely will make their championship intentions clear. Let's take you down through today's butt kicker starting grid. And once again, Graham Sanders will lead us to the green. Second pole in the season so far. He's got Austin Young, the championship leader, alongside him. Just 5,000 splitting them. Michael O'Brien, not much further back behind in third spot, lines up alongside Adam Blocker, who qualifies well finally, trying to make inroads into the top 5 in the championship, 1/10 splitting the front 2 rows. John Bader for Phil Kraus, 5th and 6th positions, while rolling from 7th there will be Marius Valioka, still waiting for those race clutch colors on his car. Philin Lazier alongside, and then a bit of a jump back in time, almost 4/10 to Caleb Bensi and Alex Guyon to round out the top 10. Alex van der Stant was not too happy with the balance of the car and how he was feeling it on the run-up into qualifying. That's seen him 1 second off the pace. He's got Matt Taylor alongside in 12th position, while David Suar. And then Tyler Graf, not actually in the LMDHs, he'll be in the GT3s. We'll run you down through those GT3 cars where, of course, Sean Campbell will be the most notable once again at the front, but only by 3/10. He's got Miguel Vigo for company once again. Ryan Otis and Matthew Morhart make up that Synergy Motorsports contingent that continues to run so strongly in the HyperX Team Championship. Christopher Hill qualifies well up in 5th inside of Joshua Chin in the white and red private label Team Hype colors, number 73. Got Andrew Marquez, Eric Staropoli, and then Chase Wilson, the best of the AMs, and Carlos Villa through your top 10. Trevor Malone will put pressure on Wilson back in 11th, with Josh Tucker on debut lining up on the edge of row number 6. Got Brian Bennett, Chris Reagan, Travis Yeagerliner, Creighton Carter, Drew White, and then Craig Forsyth with almost 3 seconds going back to 20th spot, and Jim Herrick being the final car that will line up at the very tail end of the 19 car field. They are already rolling and getting ready to rumble, so let's quickly try and run you down through today's featured onboard cameras. First up, it's Michael O'Brien, who carries with him the BMW Performance Driving School. Drive on the edge of physics and experience the ultimate rush. Visit BMW's PerformanceDrivingCenter.com. David Sirar rides with Butt Kicker. Sim racing is better with Butt Kicker. Visit thebuttkicker.com. Back over in the GT3s, Carlos Villa carries with him HyperX. Whatever you play, however you play, HyperX knows we're all gamers, and HyperX is always ready to game. While Creighton Carter back in 16th spot. We'll see Majors Garage alongside your number one source for iRacing setup. Visit majorsgarage.com. Short time before we go racing, Andrew, but what are you expecting here at Fuji?
I got to look out for that turn 1. It's a really sharp turn at the end of this long straightaway, and you can see how long it is. We have both fields on this straightaway to start right now.
And remember, the field now left in control of Graham Sanders. Sanders, I've already made that mistake. Competition, commitment, excitement. This is Lionheart. We're racing for the Gomez Sim Industries Grand Prix of Fuji, and instantly almost went 4 wide. We'll stay 3 abreast on that run into the heavy braking zone of turn number 1, but Graham Sanders will be clear. Under pressure, Michael O'Brien. We'll see one of the Hydra Race Geodesic Racing cars squeeze up the inside to make it Geodesic Racing 1, 2, and 3. Now they'll sort it out though in through turn number 3 and surely get single filed amongst themselves as the GT3s dive onto the brakes. In through turn 1, yes, Sean Campbell leads. Miguel Vigo holds on to 2nd. The field now working their way into turn 2.
And there was an incident further back in the LMDH field there, Arjuna. Someone around 6th or 7th place spun through turn 3, but the GT3s, they look like they did a much better job. Oh, but we have someone else off on the GT3 field, same spot.
Oh, it's Matthew Morhart, who then got stationary for a moment, and it's caused more chaos. It was Valiokas that had the issue for your LMDH class, but what major drama for Synergy Motorsports in that HyperX Team Championship as Matthew Morhart on the truck and back to pit lane. Adam Blocker with a bobble for the LMDHs as well. Big drama on lap number 1.
Yeah, Adam Blocker did not have a good first lap there. As you can see, he got a little bit loose even coming out of the final corner there as he was side by side with Flynn Lazier, but that was a chaotic start there. It looked like one of the Geodesic Racing team drivers just didn't quite go on that start, and it checked up the field and created just pure chaos.
Across the line at the end of lap number 1. Almost 2 seconds the margin at the very front. Big Sen's almost attempted. Van der Stant gets up in front of Blocker on the run into turn number 1, but outside of that, no major ducking and diving as we are likely to see now with those GT3s, because Sean Campbell for the very first time has got 1.5 kilometers of straight to deal with here and 1.5 kilometers of draft that he feeds to Miguel Vigo and Ryan Otis, who have stayed with him, unlike Christopher Hill and Joshua Chin, who for a moment go side by side into turn 1.
And this has been the story of Josh Chin, is he hasn't necessarily qualified the best, and I think that this track could be the one where it really costs him a shot at a top 3 here, because he really needs to do something to get around hill and stay in contact with that leading trio.
See how he's going to be able to affect it from here, but while they work their way now around the track for the second time of asking, let's see if we can go back and take a look at what happened to Valiokas in the race clutch machine. Remember, he is up there in the championship mix, and it's on the run into the fast left-hander. He's on the inside of Flynn Lazier, and he just bobbles and gets a brief tag from behind. Lost a bunch of time, but I think had a subsequent spin and lost even more ground.
Yeah, of course, once he did that, his rear tires were just really, really hot, and it cost him dearly. Does look like that he is going again, but he is definitely well down there. As you see, Adam Blocker just missing the braking zone entirely, and that's going to cost him 2 or 3 positions. His teammate Alexander Van de Sant sneaks through, as well as I believe Caleb Bensi.
Trying a bit hard there. Valiokas, my oof, by the way, was he's on pit lane, unfortunately, so I think his car is unfortunately taking too much damage. Now Blocker under fire, maybe going a bit wide at turn 1 has compromised him all the way through 100R. Going to really force Taylor to sweep out wide as they sweep through that hairpin. And I tell you, all this fighting is great to watch, but not just losing ground of Bensi in front, but they're losing ground of everybody in front of that as well, because Van der Sant 2.5 seconds off the back of Lazier. You've got Austin Young closing on Gray and Sanders at the front of your field. You can't afford to be caught out too much, especially given we're only a couple of laps away from traffic.
Yeah, it really isn't far before these LMDHs get into some GT3 traffic. So you really do want to position yourself well, and these top 5, top 6 have definitely broken away from Alexander Van de Sant, and it just looks like Adam Blocker can't find a rhythm right now. He's got to find a way to make that happen, and he just hasn't been able to do it so far.
Looks like Van de Sant with a couple of technical issues on the timing, but no major drama for him as they head off into turn 1. Still, by the way, top 3 very much separated by a string. And Sean Campbell has been unable to dispatch a Miguel Vigo. Is this going to be the first time that Sean Campbell actually has a realistic challenge for victory? Well, we'll hope so. Meanwhile, take a look at what happened to Matthew Morhart. Not the same as what happened to Valiokas. He was bobbling on the outside, and that's a terrible place to be stranded. And in the act of trying to get out of the way, he makes it worse, and surely Race Control's not going to be too impressed.
No, they won't. I believe that was Creighton Carter that he backed into there, unfortunately. But Morhart, it looks like with that impact, both to the front end and then to the rear end as well, his day is done. So any penalties will be applied post-race to Morhart.
I think Craig Forsyth went off the track momentarily, but fortunately for him, no major issue. Just taking to the grass to try and avoid rejoining the trio at the front, who have Christopher Hill and Josh Chin only 1.5 seconds behind, and the poor qualifying for Josh Chin now puts him in danger of potentially losing out on not just a potential podium, but a potential victory here, because 2 seconds the margin between 3rd and 4th, and all he's going to do is maybe grow that gap if he makes an aggressive move on the 101.
Yeah, you have to be so careful here, because it's very easy to go through several corners side by side and lose yourself a ton of time here, and Chin just can't afford to do that right now. Meanwhile, at the front, Miguel Vigo, he's been all over the back of Campbell, not just on the front straightaway, but through these technical corners as well. He's within 2/10 of a second of him throughout this entire lap, so this is some real pressure for the first time that we're seeing for Sean Campbell.
The thing is, though, that for both Vigo and Campbell, this is probably quite normal, this sort of racing between the two of them, and at the level that they are familiar with. I just wonder now if we're going to see some strategy games, because one thing that I think Josh Chin, I'm going to throw him under the bus unfortunately slightly. You said he's not had some as consistent finishes as Ryan Otis. I would say he's tried some different stuff on strategy that has not always worked out. Yes, he's had his incidents as well, but he's usually the one trying, I don't even know how to describe it, the short stop in the first stint that then compromises him later on.
Well, and it all stems back for him to the qualifying efforts, is because the only reason that he has to do those short stints is to try and get himself some track position that he wasn't able to do in qualifying. So you can just see how it snowballs into these lost points for Josh Chin all the way back to each of these qualifying performances.
Still 1, 2, 3 geodesic at the top of the LMDHs. We're just watching as Vigo just continues to poke and prod. Valiokas seems to be done for the day in LMDH. Creighton Carter, Jim Herrick, and Matthew Morhart potentially done in the GT3 class, but just a really interesting ride to follow along with the drivers and just continue to watch as I'm not sure if that you can constitute that as Sean Campbell feeling the pressure and popping out to defend from Vigo, but definitely feeling a little bit of something.
Well, and certainly Miguel Vigo is filling the mirrors of Sean Campbell. He's always offsetting himself slightly, darting around a little bit behind him, and he's just putting those bright headlights in the rearview mirror of Sean Campbell there. So I definitely think, if not necessarily Vigo trying to pass right now, he's definitely trying to get into the head of Sean Campbell just a little bit.
Watch them run down the 1.5 odd kilometer main straightaway. And again, with fixed setups, there's not much that they can have different in terms of the balance of this top end and slow end corners. You can watch the traffic start to jink in and out for the LMDHs. Hasn't really compromised too much. Josh Chin with another half send on the Christopher Hill 101 machine, but no real effort made. And as they were down through turns 1 and 2 initially, Chin finally gets it done though on corner exit.
But Hill is fighting back here through turn 2, turn 3, and just as the leaders are starting to come up here, but it looks like Chin is able to just close the door and watch these LMDHs fly around the outside of 100R there.
And it's a good thing that happened before they got into the next braking zone, because it would have made things a little bit more dicey, but 2.5 seconds, that's the gap for Josh Chin to look to now close up towards the front, as he wants to reinsert himself into the equation of that podium battle that might actually benefit Chin if Vigo attempts to go for it. Leader's almost done with the traffic, as that's Austin Young, who now sits behind his teammate Vigo and goes a long way around. Going to potentially be squeezed off the track by Sean Campbell. Oh, but just enough room was left.
Just enough, but then his teammate Austin Young comes up and dives down, or John Betaford dives down the center, and that's checked up Sean Campbell just a little bit, allowed Vigo to get right back on the back of him. It's a little bit chaotic out there with those LMDHs, isn't it, Arjuna?
It's how we like it at the end of the day. It's the first time that Lionheart has gone multi-class racing, and we've definitely enjoyed it. That's Michael O'Brien and Flynn Lazier that will go duking side by side into turn 1. Lazier downing inside. Is he going to try and squeeze O'Brien off the track? He did for a moment, and then with the overspeed as the hybrid spooled up, able to convert the position before they even got up towards turn number 3. I wonder if Vigo is saving some fuel. I would not be surprised if there's a little bit of gamesmanship going on in terms of strategy for your GT3s, but I just don't know exactly what it will be. Sean Campbell, I also wonder how much preparation he had coming into this one, because I feel like I see him racing in everything.
He is certainly a busy driver here on the iRacing service, not just in the Lionheart series, but in a number of different official and non-official races. So you do kind of wonder if, especially with his success, if he's gotten a little bit complacent with the Lionheart series, and we're seeing definitely for the first time some pressure here that seems to be able to be sustained throughout this race.
And when we talk about lack of practice for Sean Campbell, it really means, is he going to have as much information as to what's going to go on with tires, for example, over the course of the race? Is he going to know what he wants to do in terms of strategy? Does he know how the traffic might play out? It's all these different little variables that ultimately make the difference at this sort of level of racing. 2.5 seconds still, the margin at the front, by the way, of your LMDH, where Graham Sanders continues to just extend his legs out there at the front, of course on pole for the second time this season. He's already had 2 wins this year, so it'd be nice if he could add to the collection and be able to return to HyperX victory lane, but it's not going to be an easy feat by any means. Chase Wilson, by the way, is up in 6th overall in the GT3 field. He's battling with Eric Staropoli.
Yeah, and they've been having a good little fight here. I've been keeping an eye on them, and they've been going back and forth just between the two of them. And then Carlos Villa in the other Geodesic Racing GT3 car has also been all over the back of them, and it's been a nice little 3-way battle here.
On board with Carlos Villa. Now, George Inzaldo in the YouTube chat says that Sean Campbell is going slow because he isn't texting and driving. That's his extra power. I just wonder if we're not seeing him texting and driving because he's actually feeling some pressure today.
I was going to say, I think that definitely could be the case. You would think that if there was anywhere that he could text and drive, it would be down this long front straightaway. So the fact that we're not getting it, I think it just means that he's feeling the pressure.
That's a very good point. Carlos Villa put 2 wheels on the grass, and I, for a moment, thought we were going a little bit wider than we were, but he had it all under control. He's one to watch in terms of tires, by the way. He's kind of been someone that tends to burn through them a little bit more aggressively, and so we'll see him in a little bit earlier sometimes on the stints, but with this cooler conditions, will it help him out a little bit more? We'll have to wait and see, as Adam Blocker up in front of Caleb Benzie. The start really has not left Adam Blocker in a great spot. 12 and a bit seconds off of your leader, 1.5 off the back of his teammate. And for Adam Blocker, of course, after qualifying in 4th, I'm sure there'll be a little bit of frustration.
Absolutely. Blocker just got around Benzie in turn 1 of this lap, but you can tell for sure he's not happy at this point in time. He's driving very aggressively at this point, just trying to make up time. He was obviously had a really good qualifying effort with that fourth place qualifying, and then it's all gone to naught so quickly in this race. But he does have an hour and 15 minutes remaining, so anything can happen. You can't give up if you're Adam Blocker, but certainly he's made it much more difficult on himself than he was hoping for here today.
We've got probably another 10-15 minutes before we're back into traffic, because, well, not even that, probably 7.5, 10 minutes, somewhere in that range before we're into traffic again, which might be an opportunity for Blocker to close up a little bit to those in front. There's still some close fighting going there, with Kraus Bader for split by half a second, Lazier and O'Brien 0.8 there. So a couple of trains to keep an eye on, but we keep our eye on the choo-choo train at the front, where Josh Chin's been able to close now well and truly into the draft of Ryan Otis, and very soon it might become 4 cars within 1 second at the top of the GT3 field, and Christopher Hill might just be brought into the mix by the draft of Joshua Chin.
Yeah, I think Chin definitely benefited from the LMDHs coming through and maybe disrupting that leading battle just a little bit. It didn't seem like Campbell did as good a job as he normally did at sort of letting the leaders go without losing any time. So it's checked up these leading 3 just a little bit, and Chin has really started to turn it up, and he's right on the cusp of that proper draft range. So we'll see if he can close up just that little bit more and really start to put the pressure on these 3.
And of course, for Josh Chin, really the target is going to be maximum points compared to Ryan Otis, who we were riding on board with. Just want to make sure that he closes the deficit as much as he can. Brian Bennett in the 161 goes around as we take a look at a replay there. That seemed like a very lazy spin on the outside. Let's check it out from a slightly better aerial look. It's going to be by himself and just pushes out wide and tries to turn in maybe a bit too aggressively.
I think it was carrying too much speed is what happened. This was in the final corner, and it's a decreasing radius that we talked about off the top, and you can see he goes in, carries the throttle just a little bit, and he just carries too much speed, turns in too hard, and around the rear end goes, because you basically have to be braking as you're turning, and when that happens with too much speed, it rotates on you.
Absolutely. Unfortunate there, but only the tires really compromised for Bennett. Plenty of energy put through them that he'll now have to deal with the negative consequences of. We're only about 13 minutes from seeing potential GT3 pit stops in terms of time. They're 11 laps into their run, 12 laps now, 22 lap fuel window, what was estimated for us, so seems right about on the money for them to potentially be able to go a little bit further than the top of the hour, which will be a little bit of a benefit for them to shorten their windows once again. I guess the expectation would be, if you're taking tires, you're taking no more than 2 tires, which is, I think, what we've become accustomed to so far in 2023.
Yes, I would agree, but it'll be interesting to see. As we got a little bit of a battle going on here, Phil Kress and John Batafor going at each other. I think Phil Kress is really tired of seeing all 3 of the Geodesic Racing cars in front of him. He wants to get up into that battle and disrupt things just a little bit.
Absolutely. And they're already into traffic, so the track map that I have, which is just a circle, it's not actually a track map, it's a track circle, not doing a great job of actually helping me judge where everyone is relative to one another, given how long that straight is. They head off into that middle sector now, though, in chase of Austin Young, almost 4 seconds off of the back of second spot. Still, Hydra Race, Geodesic 1, 2, and 3, but potentially not for much longer. The more they fight, Flynn Lazier's looking quite quick as well. He's only within 1.3 seconds now.
Yeah, it's actually fairly tight still at the top of this LMDH category. Yes, we have the 2 breakaways with Sanders and Young, but Beta for Kraus, Lazier, and even O'Brien is really still close together. There's a lot to play for in this category. So I don't think that we've seen the last of the battles going on here today, certainly with the draft that we get and them weaving in and out of GT3 fields. Look at them just fly down the straightaway. They're going to do 3 or 4 GT3s on this one straightaway alone.
Who's going to be the bravest? Phil Kraus isn't going to be too brave. He backed off early, and I think Betafer recognized that as well, so left them a little bit of room to then work on exit, but maybe some miscommunication there. Kraus not going to get enough of a run to squeak alongside, but shows his nose, shows the potential there as they continue to funnel through this traffic. It's opened up once again at the front now as traffic plays itself in favor of our race leader. Sometimes it's a benefit to have the number 1 next to your name in traffic. Sometimes it's not. He's on the positive side of it here today.
Absolutely, and it's interesting to watch Betafor and Kraus negotiate this traffic, because Betafor is, as they go over that bump there, Betafor is tending to take a shallow entry into all these corners, whereas Kraus is really trying to open up these corners and focus on the exits, and it's producing some very interesting runs that Kraus has been getting.
Here
on
we
Betafor.
go! Either side of the traffic, and Phil Kraus up the inside has ripped third away from John Betafer. Was not content to wait behind. Phil Kraus says, gimme, 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 I want third.
That was a bold move there from Phil Kraus, and on one of John Betafer's teammates, and Carlos Villa, no less. So that was a bold move up the inside. He saw Betafer going around the long way, saw the opportunity, and seized it. And let's see if Kraus can reel in the top 3 just a little bit.
Let's take one more look at this. Let's take one more look at this. I tell you what, I don't think Betafer necessarily miscalculated going to the outside initially. It's just Phil Kraus had this idea that he could cut back underneath, and boy, was he right.
It's why Phil Kraus is who he is in the Lionheart series, and why he did so well on the IndyCar side last season. It's moments like that where you have that split second to make a decision. Do you follow Betafer, or do you try and go down that inside? Phil Kraus saw the slightest glimmer of light that he was able to throw the door open for. So great move from Kraus. And
now he leaves Betafer to potentially deal with Lazier through the traffic. This is great opportune timing of the pass. Adam Blocker gets up in front of Alexander Van der Sant. That might have been teammate coordination just swapping around there. As Blocker tries to continue his recovery drive, we'll now have to wait and see if he's going to bring with him Van der Sant up the road. Say hello once again to the GT3, a quartet that's now at the front. Not quite a quintet, because Christopher Hill still has a couple of tenths to make up before he's right on the back of the choo-choo train, but as they head across the line to close lap 13 for the GT3s, it's still Sean Campbell in front, but look at them now looking in the rearview mirror.
Absolutely, as Blocker and Van der Sant are coming up to negotiate this as well. So it's been definitely interesting to see Campbell react here at the head of this GT3 field. He still is in first place, but he's been under pressure a lot so far this race, and it's been interesting to watch how he's just sort of controlled the pace from the front, but at the same time, it doesn't seem like anything he can do to get away from these other 3 drivers here.
I will just say, you can see in the rearview mirror, or the wing mirror, that Joshua Chin's got his purple helmet, but no longer the purple car. He's gone back to the red. He's just trying to confuse us.
I really think he is, although it could have been that he just didn't like how the purple car performed at Le Mans, so he decided to go back to what was working before.
I mean, race car drivers are superstitious, aren't they?
I was going to say, it's not like race car drivers are superstitious at all. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, none of us have ever been like that before. Trevor Malone, Chris Reagan, this is 12th and 13th, but these are very much 2 AM drivers who are mixing it up amongst themselves. Not too far back to Jaeger Lane either. Now, I believe this is technically the battle for second and third in GT3M, but with Chase Wilson up in 6th, it's another big gulf in points that our AM Championship leader is going to continue to rack up.
Yeah, Wilson is doing a really good job. He's even still within shouting distance of the lead. If some calamities start to happen, he could still end up on a podium in this race in the overall GT3, let alone winning the AM class. So Wilson's doing a fantastic job, but this battle between Reagan and Malone has been going something fierce for a while. You can see Malone getting defensive there, but he goes a little bit deep, and I think that's going to open the door here for Chris Reagan.
The problem with turn 1 as well is it looks like it's cambered in, but it's really not. It falls away from you in a rather uncomfortable way at times, and Reagan will take second in class, 12th overall in GT3 away from Malone, and one step closer. Jägerliner steps, by the way, in terms of closing that draft. Somewhat, I don't want to say checking out, but separating, splintering at the front, and maybe to the point where Sean Campbell has been toying with those behind, and the string that he had been dangling, he's finally pulling away. Now almost 1 full second away. In fact, the top 4 almost all split by 1 full second.
Yeah, it finally has started to happen just a little bit, but I don't think that Vigo is out of the drafting range yet, and as long as he's still within that drafting range of Sean Campbell down this front straightaway, I think he's still got a shot at it. Meanwhile, Otis and Chin has been probably, surprisingly, the fastest driver on circuit in the GT3 field so far. So if Chin can get around Otis, he might be able to mount a challenge for Vigo and Campbell as well.
I gotta wonder how aggressively Josh Chin's going to play it here, given that I'm assuming that Ryan Otis has been saving a load of fuel, just minding his time, being there in 3rd, and not far away from heading off into pit lane for these drivers in this Gomez Sim Industries Grand Prix of Fuji, presented by Arena TV. It's back up to 4 seconds at the front of the LMDH field, where Graham Sanders continues to just run his speed, run his tempo, and looks set to potentially head off to HyperX victory lane for a 3rd time in a row. Or sorry, not 3rd time in a row, 3rd time this season. They still have some traffic to deal with, and potentially Phil Kraus starting to close as well, because last time by it was just a 10th that Phil Kraus closed, but Kraus was amongst the fastest through the traffic.
Yeah, Kraus has been, I would say, probably the most aggressive of the LMDH drivers so far that we've seen today, and it's paid off negotiating through the traffic especially. He's, as you say, he's started to open up that gap over John Betaford, and it's really starting to pay off for him. The question is, I don't think he's really gotten any true progress on Young and Sanders in front of him, so he's got to find a way to start closing that gap quickly before this first round of pit stops.
I think he'll get to Young. He has a chance to get to Young before the first cycle of pit stops, but I think beyond that, it's going to rely on traffic to help him out. He gets to the inside as they squeak through the faster entry up into this final sector. Still no change between Otis and Chin, and in fact now very much in danger of losing track of those in front. Creighton Carter has had a bit of a spill after getting back out there onto track, but it's important to note that he's at least out there and trying to accumulate some points. Andrew, you mentioned drop weeks earlier. An 18-round season, drivers allowed, a few bad rounds, but also opportunity to step away if the real world calls. And we've often seen that plays a factor in how drivers end up approaching the final couple of races of a championship.
Yes, it absolutely does, because sometimes you think that you're doing better than you are in the standings before you really start to factor in drop weeks. And of course, some of the teams will be automatically calculating these drop weeks as well and keeping track of it. But it definitely does affect your mentality just a little bit. If you know that you have a couple of races to burn when it comes in at the beginning. And it looks like, is that Michael O'Brien in down pit lane?
It is in the Graphics LC Madworks machine, and it means that as he goes up on the jacks, should see 4 tires going on, considering how long he's been up there on the air jack. But I was going to note that he came in before we even got to the half-hour mark of this race, and therefore Likely has plenty of fuel already in the tank that he doesn't need to replace, and so he's just 27.2 seconds stationary before he's off and away. I'll keep that in mind. See him file in behind the top 5 in your GT3 class, where indeed now I think you can say it is separated out 1.7 the gap between Campbell and Vigo, and then a further 1.8 back to Otis.
And you almost wonder, we talked about Otis saving a lot of fuel, but you wonder if Campbell was saving a bit of fuel from the front, and now with probably about 2 or 3 laps to go in this stint, Campbell just sort of opened up the taps and said, all right, I'm going to show you what I've got now.
Surely if you're Miguel Vigo and you knew he was saving fuel, though, you would not let him run away. Sorry, I don't mean run away. You wouldn't let him play the game of leading while saving fuel, because you know that eventually if he does try and run away, you might then be dropped. Yes, you've saved some fuel, but I feel like that's an uncomfortable risk to play.
It is an uncomfortable risk, but at the same time, there might not have been much that Miguel Vigo could do if he was having to save fuel himself. Well, but if he was obviously saving fuel as well, and at the same time, if he went out and led, that would just play into Sean Campbell's hand, knowing that he could go faster later because he had an easier job saving fuel. I think that the best thing was to do exactly what Vigo did: allow him to lead, allow him to save as much fuel as he could, whereas Vigo was saving even more behind him. That was the only real play that you have there, because if you move past him, you're just helping him.
I guess I think that maybe Vigo could have built a bit of bigger buffer to the likes of Ryan Otis and Josh Chin, as we see John Baderfer and Flynn Lazier down onto pit lane. So LMDH is starting to trickle on in, only 22 laps into what should be a 28-lap run, but it leaves plenty still out there and circulating. Also, Chase Wilson, the AM championship leader, heads off to pit lane and finds himself 21.7 seconds stationary before he's off and away. There was a small mistake there from either Baderfer or Lazier in actually trying to enter into their box, but hopefully it's not going to cost them too much time, because at the end of the day, maybe they avoid getting into another pass of GT3 traffic.
Yeah, it's interesting to see when some of these drivers are coming down pit lane, because there were a couple of drivers who came down before it ticked over into that second half hour in really the third of the race mark that you would normally see. So hopefully that doesn't present any problems for Baderfer or Lazier later, although it was probably close enough that it won't. But this is going to be interesting. Young is coming down pit lane, but there's a GT3 driver coming down pit lane as well.
I think it's Josh Chin, but I think Young was just trying to get in and out of traffic. It is, again, 28-lap window for the fuel, so I'm not necessarily too worried about the LMDHs having to come down into pit lane again. I guess I'm a little bit surprised, or not surprised, that Josh Chin once again goes slightly contra on the strategy. He's got a spec map, nice and reflective as well on the front end. Andrew Marquez becomes the next to dive off to pit lane. Matt Taylor, Caleb Bensi, they're off in towards turn number 1. It's Bensi in the race first car that's going to pop to the outside. It's a long way around and a brave way to try and make a pass, but if Matt Taylor's going to leave him room, he might be able to get it done, but Taylor's having none of it.
Yeah, Taylor's been on a little bit of a charge. He's tracked down Bensi, and they've been having a back-and-forth battle for a couple of laps here, but it looks like, at least for now, Taylor's got the better of Bensi. And Bensi, he started really strong in this race, but he's faded a little bit. Van de Sant got by him, Blocker got by him, and now Matt Taylor as well. So maybe just Bensi isn't really liking what these tires are doing. It looks like he's slipping and sliding around just a little bit out there.
Remember, we do expect that these drivers are going to be able to do a full service and take 4 tires when they come off to pit lane, so not necessarily expecting too much struggles for them there. If we go back to those who have already pitted, by the way, you've got Michael O'Brien in the middle of John Baderfer and Flynn Lazier. These are, again, 3 drivers who have already made their first stop of the race and have got plenty of clean air with which to work with initially, but now begin to work with some of the GT3 traffic that has also come down pit lane. Last time by for Michael O'Brien, he did a 1:23.800. That was not that was amongst one of the quicker times. That's because a lot of the other times were traffic times.
Yeah, it definitely does make a big difference around here, whether you're in clean air or whether you're going through some GT3 traffic. But I will say that O'Brien did a really good job on that pit stop, and he has gotten by Flynn Lazier, because remember, Flynn Lazier was right on the back of John Betafort. I think Lazier might have been that driver that we saw make the mistake on pit lane.
Gotcha. Well, Lazier also went almost 2 seconds longer in the box itself. He was 30.3 seconds stationary. I'm not sure what that was all about. Carlos Villa still in front of Eric Staropoli, but Tyler Graf is off the road on his debut in this GT3 class. Has competed so far this season in the prototypes, wanted to switch over into the GT3s, and it's proving to be an interesting experience as he gets to grips with a new machine.
Yeah, certainly a big learning curve going from high downforce prototype into a GT3 car like that. And ooh, that was some good avoiding action there by that black and pink driver.
Is that Marquez? I think it is.
I think it was Andrew Marquez, yes. And it's just another one of these decreasing radius corners. Graf, I think, carries just a little bit too much speed, and the back end comes around as he tries to turn into the final part of the corner.
It is, and subsequently something happens with Christopher Hill, who was running so well up there inside of your top 5, and to get tangled up with traffic, it's through the very same corner. Slightly different actual spin, and, well, the LMDH car couldn't quite pick out which of the Hydra Race, I think it is Hydra Race geodetic racing machines, that was. We'll look from up above, but a bit of a close call with Caleb Benzie, the race first car.
Yeah, so Hill was trying to give Benzie as much room as he could, but he, again, carries too much speed, and he's really, really tight. And because he had so much wheel in the car, when he hit the brakes, the rear end just stepped out on him.
Unfortunate there, but didn't lose too much time, I think, in that. Only about 10 seconds, so could have been a lot worse. Caleb Benzie is next on to pit lane in the race first machine. That's 4 of your LMDHs that have now pitted. Still waiting for majority of the field to come on in, but they're only 3 laps away from being forced to on fuel. 4 laps isn't long enough to get us to half distance, is it?
I don't think so, no. No, it should only get you to 48 minutes if I'm doing this right.
That does ask the question, does anyone want to try and push 2 laps longer than what we think is the maximum fuel window to try and make this a one-stop race?
It's close. I just don't know if you can do it, particularly with those long straightaway. It's really difficult to go 2 full laps here.
To clarify, I only mean in the LMDHs. I do not mean in the GT3s, because they should be down onto pit lane already, and in fact just Christopher Hill is on cue, but your leaders with the fuel saving go onto lap 23 of an expected 22 lap fuel window. Yeah, I don't think you can do it for the LMDHs, but someone could be as crazy as I am in my mental calculations here.
Yeah, it's asking a lot. I'll put it that way. Just because of how long that front straightaway is, you just burn so much fuel, and there's really not the hard braking zones to be able to make it last. As we say that, Graham Sanders, your leader, down pit lane this time by, so he definitely can't make it. So that leaves just Austin Young out there for the geodesic racing drivers. Kraus, Blocker, and Van de Sant and Taylor are still out there as well for your LMDH field.
I think we're going to see Van de Sant come off to the lane as well, but there goes any notion of a one-stop, and so it means you split effectively 53 minutes now into equal stint, surely, because you're going to require another trip down to pit lane. Don't try and play it too cute, surely, on strategy. See where Graham Sanders, after leading for so long, fares out in comparison with John Betafort, of course, his teammate that was amongst the first to end up diving onto the lane. You can see that Sanders is slow rolling off and away, releases himself from the limiter. Meanwhile, John Betafort still beginning to spool himself down the straight. Well, that was a bit aggressive there from Graham Sanders.
So the good news is that they were on the same straightaway there. The bad news is that it's one of the longest straightaways that we go to.
It's what, 13 seconds the margin between Sanders and Betafer, so we'll have to keep an eye out as to where the likes of Kraus fares related to Betafer, because he was starting to pull away, and not slowly either. Here comes the next contingent though off down onto pit lane. Phil Kraus follows in, Austin Young.
But it does look like Adam Blocker going one lap longer here, and I think that that's all that it's going to be for Adam Blocker. I don't think that he can go much past one more lap here. But it's Austin Young, Phil Kraus, and Kraus did a really good job getting on a pit lane, and I think he made up just a little bit of time on that number 11 car there.
So is that going to also help him in that battle to try and maybe close up to the lead? There is Graham Sanders working his way up and through the final sector and beginning now that pirouette through the final corner. A couple of GT3 cars rolling off and away. Young and Kraus about 20 seconds into their respective stops. So not long to go before they should drop and roll. There's the GT3 rolling. There's an LMDH rolling. It's Young 27.2 and Kraus with a lengthy stop. Was Kraus caught speeding? 33.3. I'm not necessarily sure what the call is there for the private label team Hype Car, but he's given up an awful lot of time to the top two and is going to be a lot closer to John Betafer than he would have liked.
Yeah, it wasn't a speeding penalty for sure, but it was, I think, if not 4 tires, it was definitely a full load of fuel. So if that's the case, then Kraus's play here is basically to go as long as possible on this second stint as well. He's looking at what?
And no tires in the next stop probably.
Probably a no tire pit stop, I was about to say.
Yeah, 10 minutes of fuel, so maybe that's the call. Meanwhile, say hello to pit exit for GT3 machines, because Campbell, Otis, Vigo, well, they're going to get a good look at each other exiting pit lane, but it's in a slightly different order into the way they entered, because Ryan Otis jumps in front of Miguel Vigo with his own short stop. You'll see Joshua Chin just emerging into picture behind. He'll slot in just behind.
He'll slot in behind for now, but Chin's got the fresh hot tires, and it does take a couple of laps to really get these tires up to speed on these GT3s, certainly longer than it does on the LMDHs, so Chin might be able to take advantage of some cold tires here if he can get just a little bit closer to the back of Miguel Vigo.
Check in with those that have already come down pit lane as we wait for Blocker and Taylor to head back out. We've got Kraus in front of Betafer and O'Brien. This is now going to become 3rd, 4th, and 5th positions as Blocker releases himself off of the lane right in front momentarily of Michael O'Brien. He'll get inserted now into a potential 5-way fight for the final step of the podium. And it's with all sorts of different strategies going on as well, because Blocker went short with his stop, 25.4. That's kind of a little bit more what I expected, splitting this equally compared to Phil Kraus going as long as possible.
Yeah, I was going to say Blocker had a blinding stop there because he's gained about 3 or 4 seconds on Betafer and Kraus and O'Brien there. So he did a really good job. He's leapfrogged Flynn Lazier as well as O'Brien. So really, really strong stop from Blocker.
There you can see those actual pit stop time. That doesn't include from cone to cone, which could include therefore some slight more speed and actual execution. Michael O'Brien, for example, is almost 2 seconds longer in the box than Blocker, but only 1 second longer in the lane. So in some miracle was able to shave off 1 full second just from his entry and exit out of the box. Plenty of fighting for them to keep their minds on in the LMDHs. Meanwhile, GT3's Miguel Vigo in front of Ryan Otis. And now, I don't think we're necessarily worried about the fight for first. It's the fight for third. Josh Chin and Ryan Otis on their slightly weird strategies fighting together.
Yeah, I definitely think that Campbell was definitely saving fuel in that first part of the first stint, and then once he knew that he could make it on fuel, he just put the power down, and he has powered away to the tune of 4 seconds over Vigo and Otis, with Chin just a second or so behind them as well. So it's all about second, third, and fourth right now. Chase Wilson well back now. He was at one point only about 8 seconds behind the leader of the race, now up to 17 seconds. So it's these 4 are your battle for GT3.
Yeah, just note though for Chase Wilson that he's in front of Christopher Hill, another one to have taken a slightly shorter stop in the first cycle. That's going to cost him just a few spots potentially in the second half of the race and the second cycle of pit stops when we'll get to that point. Carlos Villa is behind Eric Staropoli now for 7th spot, working their way in towards the very final sector here at Fuji. Looks like Staropoli quite comfortable with the balance of the car now, with the tires having come back into the window after heading off down onto pit lane and back. But I guess now it's all about how you work in traffic from here, because that's allowed John Baderford to slightly be dropped by Phil Kraus. Got Adam Blocker, Michael O'Brien split as well. This battle for third, I think, slightly stagnant for the time being. It's going to be very much now about how they all play through the next cycle of pit stops, given how different they all went.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see how this these strategy plays will all sort of come together at the end of this race. You got Flynn Lazier, he's all over the back of Michael O'Brien now. I think O'Brien's tires are starting to go away just a little bit. O'Brien was your first driver in from the LMDHs, so he went really short on that first stint. He's going to have to go longer on this second stint, and I definitely think the tires starting to go off.
They're pretty equal for O'Brien and Lazier, along with Baderford. They've been out there 9 to 11 laps respectively amongst the trio, so there is those three drivers that we will expect down in maybe another 15 laps at the most for Michael O'Brien. The other guys have a couple more laps potentially under their belt. Going to be interesting how that plays out. Now, Miguel Vigo at front of shot feels pressure, yes, from Ryan Otis, but gaps come down to under 4 seconds to Sean Campbell. Last lap, I think Miguel Vigo starts to get the hammer down, and see the lap times to compare them. 35.9 for Campbell, and it's going to be a 35.5 for Vigo. That's a big difference as Staropoli has gone around.
That's a shame for Staropoli, who had been doing a nice strong race inside that top 10. He's going to get the car rotated back around, but it's going to cost him probably a good 10 or 15 seconds here. Similar to what we saw before, he just carried a little bit too much speed into that decreasing radius, and then he does make some contact with a couple of other drivers there as well.
Let's take a look on board with him. You'll see just what it looked like. It's partially on the downshift as well. You can see the front clip initially tagged, and then a much bigger side contact. I expect him probably down on pit lane in a handful of moments' time. Austin Young's had something happen to him as well, because suddenly has dropped off and is in the clutches of Phil Kraus.
Yeah, what's happened to Young?
From being 2 seconds, what is in the water in Fuji, because this has been one of the wildest races that we've had, which is saying something. Austin Young. Oh my goodness.
That is a big moment there for Austin Young, and he is fortunate to be able to save that. One of the nice things about Fuji and the Herman Tilke redesign that it had, it does have miles and miles of paved runoff area, and Austin Young took advantage of every square foot of that on the exit of turn 3 there.
I could run for miles and miles. Oh, I've got the stuck in my head right now. Halfway through this race, though, and now Austin Young is very much going to feel the pressure. Better situation than Staropoli, who ended up having to take a tow back to pit lane. So whatever damage he had on his car, unfortunately, not going to be able to buff that one out. Well, still got plenty of racing to go here in the land of the rising sun. We're live on RaceSpotTV for round 7 of the Butt Kicker Sports Car Series, the Gomez Sim Industries Grand Prix of Fuji, presented by Arena TV. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with the run to the checkered flag. Welcome back to RaceSpotTV and coverage of the 2023 Butt Kicker Sports Car Series. We're at the Fuji International Speedway for Round 7, the Gomez Sim Industry Grand Prix of Fuji, presented by Arena TV. Hello everyone, Arjuna Kankipati alongside with Andrew Kinsella as we make our way closer and closer to a second round of pit stops and closer to the checkered flag. Don't forget you can follow along with live timing and scoring by heading to RaceSpot.tv/timing. Continues to be a large gap at the front of both of our classes, with Graham Sanders and Sean Campbell continuing to pave the way, but fights for second and fights behind continue to rage in what's been a rather intriguing opening 50-odd minutes to this race, Andrew.
It has been intriguing, and I don't think that the intrigue is quite done yet, because we've got some battles breaking out. Not only did Austin Young have that moment that's put him back into the hands of Phil Kraus, but John Bedifer and Adam Blocker have really been going at it the last few laps. Michael O'Brien and Flynn Lazier still have their battle going on, and Graham Sanders isn't necessarily going very fast out front. He's lost 2 seconds over the last couple of laps, so it's all starting to come back together in the LMDH field.
The traffic was giving, the traffic is now taking from our race leader. Here's Blocker on the case of John Bedifer. Again, with Bedifer having pitted 14 laps ago, 7 laps earlier than Adam Blocker. We'll see him down to pit lane in the next 10 or so laps we expect. Blocker will stay out there and continue to run and have a shorter pit stop as feasibly would be possible, one would suspect, inside of the top 5 for the time being. And given that he started up there in 4th and dropped down to as low as 10th at one point in time, being able to battle his way back up into the top 5, it's not totally out of a chance for a podium, not totally out of a chance for second, you'd have to say, which is a pretty good fight back.
For being 15 seconds back after 6 laps of this race, and to only be 11 seconds back at your race leader right now, Blocker has been had nothing short of a miraculous recovery drive at this point to be knocking on the door of a top 4, and I still think that he's got a really good shot at a podium if his strategy plays out here. You say that he's going to go a lot longer than Bedifer. I don't know that he's going to go that much longer, because remember, he had that shorter pit stop, Arjuna, so I think he's probably only going to go maybe 3-4 laps longer than Bedifer on this stint.
It's only a 3-second delta in the pit stop time, but tires may be a factor there. Blocker half-heartedly around the outside, no real commitment to the move, and filters back into line. Trevor Malone, I think, is going to give us another case of the deja vu as we head in through what is very quickly becoming an unpopular corner for the GT3 machines. And at this point, claiming a 6th or 7th victim. I've lost count.
Fortunately for Malone, that was probably the one that got away the easiest. He was the one who got away the easiest out of that small mistake there. Looked like he might have gotten a little bit distracted. The GT3 in front of him was a little bit loose through there, so I think it might have just thrown him off just a little bit. But we're back to the battle between Bedifer and Blocker's all over the back of that number 67 car in front of him.
It's not making it easy as they dive through traffic. Going to force one of those geodesic GT3 machines, Carlos Villa, to scooch up and out of the groove to accommodate the oncoming LMDH contenders. All the while we track this battle, Phil Kraus, I think, is about to have a crack at getting up to second alongside with Austin Young before they even get to the start-finish line. And in this quest on forward, Phil Kraus has already had one brave move on a Hydro Race geodesic racing driver. This one maybe a little less brave, committed on the brakes, and Phil Kraus through to second.
He's through, but Austin Young isn't letting him go easily there. Tried to do the over-under. Now he's going to chuck it up the inside. Thinks better of it, though. So for now, Kraus is solidifying his hold on that second place, but don't count Austin Young out of it yet. I will say it does look like that Kraus just has that final corner figured out just a little bit better than some of the other LMDH competitors. And that's a really big advantage to have. If you can get off of the final corner well and get you have an advantage not only on that corner, but all the way down that long straightaway as well. And that's what allowed Kraus to get around Austin Young.
It's definitely one of the tracks that some drivers will have prior experience with. Not, of course, with this setup necessarily, but with this car at this track, and definitely that is something that is a benefit to bring to the preparation. Already the margin extends a little bit more back to Young. You can see the cluster in front that is second, third, and fourth in the GT3s that they will be next coming up towards. And speaking of second, third, and fourth, Josh Chin slightly dropping back of Ryan Otis, yes, but at one point I was hoping that Sean Campbell would feel the pressure from Miguel Vigo. It's still about 4 odd seconds. Hasn't really changed too much.
The gap is stabilized, but the good news is that Campbell isn't going away into the sunset either, so there's definitely some life still in this GT3 race that we saw early on, and we've seen the final complex claim a number of GT3 drivers. Even the best driver in this field can make a mistake, so definitely this GT3 race is not done yet.
I think we need to try and put the commentator's curse down on Sean Campbell.
I'm certainly trying right now.
I know, we are giving it our best efforts. We will see how the racing gods smile down on us. Have smiled on Phil Krause as he has broken the toe to Austin Young. Tyler Graf back down on pit lane, becomes the first to pit for potentially the final time today. Blocker and Bader still not bottled up behind a handful. They got Drew White that they're trying to get past for the time being. And Blocker's going to try and set this one up as they head into the final corner. Goes out wide, cuts back underneath, tries to get the hybrid. Powering down that main straight a little bit earlier. I don't think it necessarily played out.
I don't know about that. Blocker's really tucked up under the back of John Betafor, and now he pulls out to the outside. Looks like Blocker's going to try and hold Betafor onto that inside line, and then sweep out into the braking zone, take that outside line on the racing line, see if he can go around the long way. Oh, but we have a little bit of a blink there. That's not what Betafor is hoping to see. Betafor is able to just keep his concentration and keeps the position for now, but that was a good attempt there from Adam Blocker.
Josh Chin is down on pit lane in GT3s. He's going to now force Ryan Otis potentially to respond. 34 minutes to go, so plenty of racing left. That was a interesting little squabble there for Betafor and Blocker. See if traffic once again sets them up to do it. You do have a similar situation brewing with O'Brien and Lazier behind. Already seen Lazier make this move happen once. He's going to have to do it again courtesy of the traffic. And it's all before we've even gotten back into the pit stops.
Yeah, Lazier has been all over the back of O'Brien for about the last 5 laps here. And it just looks like O'Brien has got his hands full keeping Lazier behind him. But no matter what, Lazier just can't quite seem to get clear of O'Brien. And maybe this traffic will be what does it for Lazier. But he's got to find some little advantage here to get around O'Brien.
See if it's that moment behind the GT3 car that allows Lazier to get the run. He goes outside, but doesn't really seem like he's got any overspeed, and they're going to close on that GT3 car potentially at just the wrong time. Lazier has to tuck back in, and under brakes gets uncomfortably close to the rear diffuser, but slows it down just in time. Have to give it a go. Next time by. O'Brien's already on to lap 21 of a maximum of 28. He is surely not far away from bringing it down to the lane.
You got to be thinking that maybe Lazier just should be holding off this pressure just a little bit and just waiting for O'Brien to go down pit lane and using the pit strategy to leapfrog O'Brien and rather than using up all of his tires now. But it's so hard to think about that when you're in the car in the midst of a battle like this, that maybe discretion can be the better part of valor sometimes. Absolutely.
It's one of those things where you do need a strategist sometimes to kind of help you out, and that's why a lot of times when we talk about the bigger teams, we talk about how the strategist will work with them. It's not just them that's fighting, of course. Look at Blocker and Betafor snaking back and forth with Trevor Malone trying to head off down towards pit lane. Blocker not alongside, but is he going to think about ascend? He will. Throws it up the inside. Betafor gives him just enough room, tries to hang it strong on the outside. Blocker tries to run him out of road, and it'll mean that they're still alongside as they head up the hill into the left-hand sweeper. Betafor's got the inside. Betafor's got fourth.
Yeah, really nice defense there from Betafur. There was a little bit of an optimistic move from Blocker, but they both made it work through turn 1, and Betafur did just enough to be able to hold on to that 4th position there. But I think it's only a matter of time at this point before Blocker gets around Betafur. The question is, will he have enough time between when Betafur goes in for a pit stop and when Blocker finally comes down pit lane? What will the strategy do to separate these two?
30 odd minutes to go, and that means as once again we go
Oh,
side
that
by
was a
side.
send from Blocker.
This time, not at a place where traditionally you have a send. Blocker still alongside, but there's the inevitable contact. Betafur squarely doors Blocker, and now surely the temper's starting to build.
Yeah, the gloves are definitely off between these two, and you and I both know, Arjuna, that you don't necessarily want to have the gloves off with Blocker, but Betafur, the discretion is the better part of valor here. He ducks into pit lane.
He says, I want no more part of this. Adam Blocker finally has some clean air, but at the cost of what? That's the question. Lazier's up in front of O'Brien as well. Had some fun while it lasted. Go back to the GT3s for a moment, where Chase Wilson continues to run quite well. He's in 4th overall, yes, with Josh Chin having pitted already, but he's in front of Christopher Hill on his own little recovery.
As we see, it looks like one of the sort of back marker LMDH is in the middle of this fight, and it's creating a little bit of chaos here. But yeah, I'm not quite sure exactly what happened to Hill that put him this far back, but you can tell he's just not quite able to get up to Chase Wilson. It looks like both of them, oh no, just Wilson will be coming down pit lane this time by. So we've just ticked over into less than 30 minutes remaining. So looks like everyone is going to start coming down pit lane probably sooner rather than later here.
We did see the mistake from Christopher Hill earlier, and so that's why he's dropped further back, and now Chase Wilson's earlier pit stop, or shorter pit stop, sees him come in slightly earlier. This is the 53 of Craig Forsyth who goes around, and it's nice to see a car have an issue at a corner that we don't necessarily see too many issues at. I think the same thing could be said for this, although I don't think Trevor Malone's going to be too happy that we're talking about issues for him.
Well, we did talk about a certain bump early on before we came on the air, Arjuna, and Trevor Malone is the first victim of that bump, which you predicted would be the trouble spot, but it turns out not to be the case.
I'm surprised that more of these GT3 cars haven't had issue through that corner, where usually there is a chicane, but we run the no chicane layout today, and so only the one issue there. I'm not complaining about it, that's for sure. Miguel Vigo and Ryan Otis, they've got the 71 up in front of them. That's Creighton Carter to feed Vigo some draft. Not necessarily going to complain about that, but these two drivers have lost about a second to Sean Campbell, who's pulled the margin up to 5 seconds.
Yes, he has it, and one thing that to note is that Josh Chin is not on the back here. He has been one of the drivers who's come down pit lane, so it'll be interesting to see, again, this early stop, both first and second cycle for Josh Chin, whether it finally pays off for him. It definitely got him a little bit closer the last time through the cycle, but will it have the same effect this time? But right now, it's the battle between Otis and Vigo, and the question is, how much do you hold each other up doing his battling, and how much do you play in the hand of Josh Chin?
Chin has had some traffic to contend with. He's behind Reagan now, of course, but an interesting factor. Graham Sanders into pit lane for his final stop today. See where it fares him out in relation to John Betafur, who's heading off into the final couple of corners now, but not really going to be too close. It was a 25.5 second stop. There's a lot of smoke there through a familiar corner. It's going to be a 28.4 second stop for Graham Sanders, so he's taken tires once again.
And it's a little bit more fuel than I think that he necessarily needs from this point on. Interesting that he took that long, and Betafur took so much less time than he did. But at the same time, I think Sanders at this point is very secure in his position at the front of this field. So barring a major mistake, he's got control of the race right now. So I don't think a couple of extra seconds of fuel is going to make a big difference here.
No, absolutely not. Although Kraus had started to close the margin momentarily. It was down to 6 and a bit seconds, and it was only shrinking from there. So definitely something just to keep our eye on. Kraus still out there. Lap 18 of the run for him. He did a 33.3 second stop, let's not forget. We expect him to go as long as feasibly possible, and to potentially not take tires at the end given the track conditions that we have seen. Speaking of track conditions, it's warmed up but not too much. Only 31 degrees Celsius on the track itself, although I think it's the wind that stands out more to me. 16-kilometer-hour gusts of wind, surely that must be playing a bit of a factor for some of the GT3 machines.
Yeah, the wind is definitely going to be a factor for the GT3s, but I will say that it is just 8:30 and it's 31 degrees on track. So you say it's only 31 degrees, but I say it's only 31 so far. We still have 25 minutes to go, and it's gone up almost 7 degrees C since we started this race. So it could go up another 3 or 4 degrees by the end of this race, and we could really start to see some people sliding around out there.
It's like you're asking for trouble, aren't you?
Does the trouble involve Sean Campbell?
Oh, good point. Yes, please. I won't complain about that. I heard the klaxon go off. It's because not just Austin Young has come off in towards pit lane, but Adam Blocker has as well. And so I think this is now going to be a good indication of where we fare out relative to our race leader, because he's heading off to enter the final sector. His teammate Austin Young enters the box.
And we have all of the LMDHs barring Phil Kraus down this time by not just Young and Blocker, but Lazier, O'Brien, and Van de Sande as well. So basically this is the full strategy play right here. All of these drivers will have to see where they all sort themselves out. But for right now, it looks like it looks like Sanders is going to be well clear of all of these drivers when he comes through.
He is already blasting off into the braking zone as Austin Young drops and rolls. 26 seconds stationary for him. 25.4 for Blocker. 24.0 for Lazier. There's going to be some pretty healthy margins between them, all things considered. And so I think Adam Blocker has emerged in front of John Baderfer, but not by much. So it's been a bit of a change there, I guess, in the running order. 2 seconds the margin between the two. Now we just wait for Phil Kraus to see where he places out in all of this.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's exactly what Blocker was hoping for, is by going those 3 or 4 laps longer than Baderfer did, he was able to get that gap up to about a second and a half once the tires all come up to temperature. The main thing for Blocker now is to set his sights on Young and Kraus in front of him, because the fight with Baderfer cost him about 3 or 4 seconds. As he gets really close to a GT3 car through that corner there, that cost him about a second. But if Blocker can set his sights forward, he's got a really good shot at a podium, but he has to be perfect through these final 22 odd minutes.
He's getting his tires still up to temperature as well, let's not forget. So he's had previous lap or so to do so. Went a bit wide through the final corner, and that did not look like a healthy exit off. He tries to maybe cut the draft to John Baderfer, but I don't think it's necessarily even going to matter. Already alongside and popping to try and make the move happen. It's going to be Blocker that tries to squeeze himself as tight to the apex as possible initially. Now tries to open up the radius of the corner. Baderfer once again has got to watch out. Blocker didn't leave him much room before. Does not do so once again, and holds on to 4th spot.
Nice defense there from Blocker after he made that mistake in the final corner. Open up the door for Baderfer just temporarily, but I think a combination of colder tires and some GT3 traffic, Baderfer was just sort of able, or more content to not fight him too hard on that one. Maybe live to fight another day as they weave their way through these GT3 traffic.
And so still plenty of opportunity through that traffic to come. Alex Van der Sande, by the way, has dropped quite a considerable amount of time, and it was, I think, assisted is maybe the best way to put it. He has Phil Kraus getting past him as the race leader. and then assists himself off the track.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it was assisted by anyone other than driver error there. Just one of those things where I think he was trying to cut back on Phil Kraus, and he just cut that first corner a little bit too much. You can see from that view alone just how much that corner falls off on the corner exit there. So he just hooked his tire, and around it went.
I think that was a great way to kind of take a look at how that corner really looks from driver's eye, because it's not a simple one by any means. So Kraus hypothetically can make it another 6 laps from here, which means we're running 1 minute 20s, so that is what, roughly another 8 minutes, so that is 10 minutes of fuel. Pit lane delta's 27 seconds. Let's say add in another 15 seconds for the fuel. He's got a maybe 6-second advantage with which he'll have to defend in 12 minutes at the end. I don't know if he's going to have enough tire to do that.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. And here's the thing, because he was right near Austin Young. Graham Sanders has sort of backed himself up just a little bit here, so I don't know that Kraus even really needs to do that. It's almost at the point where he could go down pit lane, and even if he takes tires, he could be very close to Sanders.
Yeah, because everyone who had just come down to the lane was in and out in about 55 seconds, so gaps at 51. Be pretty close. We'll see what the call is, where the wisdom lies. Ryan Otis off and away, stationary in the lane for 17.5. Joshua Chin up to speed, was stationary for 16.1. But Otis off of the limiter already, still as we wait for Josh Chin to even get close into the braking zone. Ryan Otis, just by sitting there and waiting behind Miguel Vigo, has a almost 4-second advantage over his championship rival for second, Joshua Chin.
Yeah, I really think that Chin needs to abandon this early pit stop strategy that he's been trying to make work, because every single time when it comes to the final pit stop, he gets beaten by Ryan Otis in the less tire. Oh, Austin Young has made a big mistake there, and that car does not look healthy.
Yeah, Adam Blocker's through, Badefur's through, and this surely is not going to last long before Austin Young has to bring that car to the lane. The left front looks like it is very, very broken, and it comes through the bump and, well, left front into the wall.
Yeah, not only the bump, but the sausage curbs on the exit as well. You're going to see he's going to hit the bump here. It's going to put his car in the air, and then he's going to hit the exit curb, hook the left front tire on it, and then straight into the wall.
He's still going.
That was a big mistake from Young. It looks like
he's still going. That car is surely not right. Surely.
No, you can tell that he is definitely wounded here, but I think that he knows basically the farthest he can go down, if he stays out, is probably going to be somewhere around David Sirwa. But if he goes into the pits, it's going to be many, many minutes of repairs, so he's just going to try and salvage whatever he can at this point.
Phil Kraus is off onto the lane, so it means that as he does go up on the jacks, we get the answer to the question that at least I thought was still open. Now, we'll get an answer to the other question. How far behind Graham Sanders is he going to be?
If this is a 25-second stop and it's a 27-second delta on pit lane, then he should be within 1.5 to 2 seconds of Sanders when all is said and done. 23-second stop from Phil Kraus. He is going to come out right with Graham Sanders here. This is going to be a dogfight to the finish.
But its tires not up to temperature. It's a driver that's still tentative on pit lane exit. Side by side they will go. Phil Kraus does leave Sanders room, but he does not take advantage. It's a new race leader. Phil Kraus is in front.
And Graham Sanders has got to be thinking, where the heck did Phil Kraus come from? because Sanders has been in the lead of this race from the drop of the green flag. Suddenly, that pink number 91 is right. Oh, wow.
Goes to the outside, forces Kraus to concede, and Sanders back in front. But with still 16 minutes to go, we've got a dogfight from here.
Absolutely, we do. And Phil Kraus has the fresh tires, and he has shown the speed at different points in this race to be able to get up to Graham Sanders. He just had too big a gap. Now he's bridged that gap. This is going to be a fight to the finish for sure.
Now head off to the straight, to the toe once more, and we'll see how it fares out for them from there. Now, I did not figure out what happened to Miguel Vigo. But Miguel Vigo is no longer on the track and finds himself no longer in second. It was all looking like it was going so well.
Not only is he no longer in second, but he has retired from this session as well. So whatever it was a big incident that caused Miguel Vigo to retire here.
I'm not quite sure what happened to him. Austin Young's come back down to pit lane in that number 11, so finally admits that the car is not right. But a couple of moments that I have to try and figure out what's going on. Phil Kraus surely has the tires where he needs them to be though now. Only 1.2 back. Has 15 minutes with which to work. Should mean an estimated 12, maybe 13 laps.
Kraus has definitely got the advantage on tires here. He's just got to find a way to get them fired up and working. He's got to negotiate this traffic, make sure that Sanders doesn't get away, because you can see Sanders has definitely started to turn up the wick here. He's been comfortable all race long, but it definitely looks like there's another gear that he's got, and he's trying to do it. One thing that I've noticed, Sanders really likes that sweeping outside entry to that corner, whereas Phil Kraus really likes to hug the inside there. And I think that you're going to see a difference between the two of them come into play later on as we set up a pass. And I do think that Kraus being able to have that inside line is going to create an advantage for him at some point.
Not quite sure what happened to Miguel Vigo. We'll try and get word from him if we can, but it didn't seem to be anything apparent, and it didn't seem like he sped on pit entry, which was another thing that I guess it could have been. But it means that now Ryan Otis grabs second as a result. Josh Chin will be in third. That's just going to slightly extend the margin in the championship for Ryan Otis. And second, as Sean Campbell heads off down towards the lane. Not just a fight for first in the LMDH. We may potentially get treated to Adam Blocker and John Bader for, are we at round 6 yet or round 7 today?
There's definitely been a few shots at it, and then don't look now, but there might be a third car in that battle, because Flynn Lazier is only about another second down the road, and he's closing fast as well.
And he's another one that's enjoyed a good day. Kraus is +4, Lazier +3, Guyon +3 as well. In the GT3s, +5 for Villa, +7 for Jägerlainer, so a handful of drivers taking full advantage of what's been going on. Are we going to see a move? Because Phil Kraus is right up the gearbox of Graham Sanders, forces him to compromise his entry in towards turn number 1. The private label Team Hype Machine once again tries to go the long way around. Not seen it work out too many times, and once again just being bodied off the track, but being bold enough to stay alongside. Joshua Chin says, no thank you, get me out of this one, as his teammate once again goes to the lead.
That was a power move from Phil Kraus. He hung out on that outside lane, but Sanders is not letting him go quietly. He's going to try this dive down again. We saw it before, but Phil Kraus just chops the nose off of Graham Sanders there.
That was a little bit aggressive from Phil Kraus, but Sanders was not alongside, so Kraus had every right to do so, and it's Kraus this time that will lead them on that run down that main straightaway. I wonder if you want to be first or second in the final 5 minutes of the race. Do you want to be at the mercy of those behind, or do you want to be in control of your own destiny?
I think if you're Phil Krause, it doesn't matter as much. I think if you're Graham Sanders with the older tires, you really want to be ahead. So the fact that Phil Krause has been able to get around Graham Sanders, it's going to make it harder for Sanders to close back up on him through the technical bits. He's still within drafting range, but you can see just within that one lap alone, Sanders has dropped almost a full second behind Phil Krause, and most of that happened during the technical bits. So I think that Phil Krause is exactly where he needs to be right now.
And this is what happens now that we open up the windows a little bit more, right? Because this car in its update a couple of weeks ago got slightly bigger fuel tank, which meant that we had a slightly bigger window with which to play, and it means these drivers can adjust their strategies and be a little bit more dynamic with them. It's nice to see, and it seems like we're in a similar spot for the GT3s, although I will just say, if Josh Chin goes back and listens to this, Phil Krause won by going long on fuel, not by going short on fuel.
Yes, and Ryan Otis has come out on top with Josh Chin also by going longer on fuel, not by going shorter on fuel. So I'm detecting a pattern here, Arjuna.
Oh, poor Josh Chin, getting thrown right under the bus, and he's not even here. It's the best part. He can't say anything about it, I guess.
Exactly.
So 1.4 the margin at the final corner between the top two. Phil Krause continues with the slightly fresher tires to just also have the better lock on that final corner and getting the power down and running down the 1.5 kilometers. And at the end of lap 56 with about 10 minutes to go, he leads this GSI Grand Prix of Fuji. Still Sean Campbell at the front of the GT3 field. We thought we'd have a challenge for once. But Sean Campbell continues to defy the expectations.
He does, but it was definitely not the easy drive that he has had in the past. He was under enormous pressure for that first stint. And even now, he's only 10 seconds, 11 seconds down the road from Ryan Otis. So it was not the walk in the park that we've seen, the 30 or 40 seconds that we've seen him win by in the past.
So are we saying that next week, or in 2 weeks' time, excuse me, we'll have cut the gap down in half again?
Well, 2 weeks' time is Mosport, and I have no idea what's going to happen at Mosport.
I honestly don't know if I'm going to be commentating on Mosport or not. I don't know if I want to.
I don't know if I'll be able to speak quick enough to get through all the action that's going to happen on the track.
I think I'm going to go crazy during that race. The worst part will be that usually during these Lionheart races, I have so many different views of what's going on. So I know exactly what has happened for the most part during the races. I'll be on the other side of the world with just a laptop to commentate from. So that yes, we'll see. I think I'm more bummed that I might not get to commentate on Lionheart Retro that same week at Iowa, which is one of my personal.
That's always a good one.
Yeah, I know it's one of your personal favorites too. It's always a good one.
Yeah, I've had a number of brushes with Destiny at Iowa, both good and bad, we'll say.
The short ovals are a beast in and of themselves. You know what we're going to need to do? Lionheart Sportscar Series goes to an oval. Drew White is going to find his way back onto track.
And that's an interesting spot to lose the car as he rejoins right in front of the battle between Blocker and Betafer. This one was, I'm not sure what happened there, Arjuna.
I think we need to take a look on board. Coming in towards the right-hander, looks tidy, looks okay. Oh, it's just stabbing on the throttle.
Yeah.
And then once it gets off, the car just pitches its way back.
Yeah, just clumsy inputs. You need to be much more subtle. Sometimes the GT3 cars can respond to the strong inputs, but more often than not on those long sweepers, you need to be subtle with the inputs. And there was just the weight transferred to the front, to the back, to the front again, and it completely upset the car.
I find even more here on iRacing than anywhere else. You need to be smooth and the GT3s to be fast. And so, yeah, that's definitely something to keep your eye on. Still haven't figured out where in the Bermuda Triangle Miguel Vigo has been lost, but unfortunate break for him. It definitely seems like I certainly had a lot of expectations for Miguel in the first round at Sebring. Did not go well, was punted off in those first couple of corners of the lap, and it's kind of been the story of his season.
It really has. He hasn't been able to put together a run of good races, and meanwhile, his sparring partner Sean Campbell has been just having his way at the front of the GT3 field. So it's been basically a tale of two seasons that we've been watching between the two of them. As on screen right now, we're watching the battle between Betafor and Blocker. Blocker's got a little bit of connection issues right now, which is going to make this even harder to negotiate the GT3 traffic.
See the sparks being kicked up in front of them. No stress whatsoever. They've got a second splitting them. It's 2 seconds that splits Kraus from Sanders at the front. So fresh tires continuing to look quite strong. I think part of the reason why the go long strategy has worked well here is the fact that it's gotten warmer as we've gone through the race, because tires have lasted better at the start. You made a more effective use of them before you've come in to take fresh rubber. And as we take a look at the track conditions, interesting to note, with just 5 minutes to go, it's only picked up 1 more degree in terms of track temperature compared to when we last checked in.
Yeah, but every degree counts, especially at that sort of track temperature, and every bit that you're using up the tires, as you say, you're absolutely correct that the more that you use the tires, the more that going long strategy really plays out, and it's worked a treat for Phil Kraus here.
So 5 minutes to go. Not expecting a challenge up front. Still trying to get the commentator's curse to come down. 4 retirements in the GT3, Miguel Vigo, Eric Staropoli, Jim Herrick, Matthew Morhart. And then in your LMDH, just Marius Valiokas, the retiree today. Which means that his spotter, Ted Lowendick, probably didn't have too much spotting to necessarily do after the lap 1 contact that Valiokas found himself in. Now, Matt Taylor's going slow out there on track. Not necessarily sure what's going on, but the car seems like it's run out of gear.
Yeah, I'm not entirely certain what's going on.
Is he stuck in third?
Yeah, it's almost like he can't shift right now.
Oh, there we go. He found a gear.
But that definitely seems like a hardware issue, Arjuna.
Okay, he's down to second. That was the thing that I was concerned about. Was it going to keep working? Unfortunately, it did. So, Matt Taylor bled a position to Alexander Van der Sant, yes, but fortunately not one to Caleb Bensi just yet. And it goes to show that you can't ever be guaranteed of anything in sim racing. We do have our own hardware issues from time to time as well. I'm not sure what issue Graham Sanders has had, but he's now 8 seconds off of your race leader.
And that's happened in this last lap as well, so that must have been a big moment for Sanders while we were watching on board with Taylor. And it's just through turn 2 there, and oh, that was a big moment through 100R, and again a beneficiary of those miles and miles of runoff, but it's definitely cost him any hope that he had of getting back to Phil Kraus.
Clearly we need to put sand traps everywhere.
At the very least, some kind of grass.
So here's the problem if you do that at Fuji. What happens when it rains?
That is true, yes. I mean, even gravel traps here, I feel like would just turn into mud pits pretty quickly.
No, I've got to assume the tarmac here is actually for a reason. Like, this is one of the few tracks where I can concede that you probably have to consider the environmental impact of your runoff, or the impact the environment has on the runoff. That's probably the right way to phrase it. And yes, definitely a concern. Not concerned about who's going to win this race. I think it's going to be who stands on the podium with first and second that has a question mark still attached to it. 2 laps to go at the line. Blocker still third. Betafor in behind. Lazier not too far off as well. Oh, these are three drivers who we knew were going to battle as hard as they could, but John Betafor on the curb loses out.
Just as I was about to say, it's going to come down to who makes a mistake. John Betafor makes that mistake, and it's that bump again And he has fallen all the way down, not just behind Lazier, but also behind O'Brien as well. So now it's all down to Lazier. Will Lazier be able to get back onto the back of Adam Blocker here? But you can see he just goes through behind the GT3, hits the bump, and then hits the curb on the outside. And his car was still bouncing when he got back on the power while he was on top of that curb, and it just spun him right around.
Gotta wonder if part of it was as well that he was pinched a little bit tight on entry, and so maybe he had two wheels to the left side of the curb, 2 wheels on the grass, and so maybe that's a mistake that doesn't happen if he's not trying to hustle it through traffic so aggressively. Think it means that Blocker doesn't have too much of a fight to concern himself with when it comes to the final step of the podium. What an up and down race it has been for Adam Blocker. He'll be thrilled with that, but Phil Krause is on the penultimate lap of the race, heading into the final sector, getting set to take the white flag, and it's a victory he's had to earn, first with strategy, and then out on track as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a really strong race from Krause. We saw he had pace. He didn't qualify quite as well as we were thinking he was going to, but from the drop of the green flag, he's been moving forward through the field. He was demonstrating pace, even though he was a few seconds behind Sanders for most of the race, and then that strategy call that he made to get himself in a position is just brilliant strategy. So really, really good job from Bill Krause as he comes down for what should be the white flag here.
It should be. Brian Bennett and Travis Jägerlehner fighting like it's still the first lap of the race in some ways, with how aggressively they were squeezing to the wall. Bennett in the 161 is in front of the 17, but they will have the leader to blast on past them and deprive them of an additional lap with which to do battle. Is Flynn Lazier going to get an opportunity to get onto the back of Adam Blocker? He's cut the gap in half since the last time we saw them. It's almost down to half a second as Michael O'Brien's the latest one to make a mistake, and I think he's run out of fuel.
Yeah, I think he's just miscalculated slightly. He was the first driver to pit both times, and now he's just parked at the entrance to turn 1. So disaster for O'Brien. That gives one more position back to John Badeford, and that'll he'll be fortunate to get a top 5 out of this. Also, quick note, Austin Young has also pulled off, so the wounded car did not make it to the finish.
He has come back onto track, though, so credit to him trying to recover some points. Michael O'Brien looks like a hardware failure more than anything. Is rolling once again. Will be able to grab 6th spot. Another wild race in this butt kicker sports car series, and it seems like Phil Krause does quite well in these type of affairs. He wins once more, this time in the Gomez Sim Industries Grand Prix of Fuji, presented by Arena TV. It's a fantastic drive in that private label Team Hype number 91, and he deservedly crosses the line clear of those behind. Sanders 2nd, Blocker 3rd, Lazier 4th, while in the GT3, Sean Campbell was not to be deprived of a 7th win in 7 races.
A really deserving win there for Krause. The strategy, the driving was perfect. And then Campbell, what can you say? Just the domination continues. Only 13 seconds, so the field is getting closer to him. They kept him honest through that first session, and then here comes Chase Wilson across the line as well. 6th place overall and top in the AM class.
Chase Wilson grabs another deserved victory in the GT3 AM class, and more importantly continues to just build up that advantage in points to those behind. What an impressive job he has done to be able to consistently perform up towards the front. We'll get the final couple of cars to finish things up, and then we can grab a look at some race results, but a difficult day for some. The contrast between high speed and slower speed corners, as expected, did bring its issues, but not necessarily with the multi-class nature of the racing here. If anything, it was more just with the balance that some of these cars had through some of the tighter and twistier sections. Here's a look at the butt kicker race results. Phil Krause gets a 2nd career victory in the series in front of Graham Sanders, who scavenges a podium for the Hydra Race Geodesic Racing team, who at one point were running 1, 2, and 3 and looking so strong. Adam Blocker 3rd in front of Flynn Lazier, while John Badeford rounds out their top 5. Michael O'Brien, well, if it was a hardware failure, he got it fixed in time to grab 6th in front of Alexander Van der Sant, with Matt Taylor, Caleb Bensi, and then Alex Guyon through your top 10. Just one car in that top 10, one lap down. David Sirra, as well as Austin Young, able to get to the finish, albeit in Young's case 4 laps adrift. Valiokis retires at the end of lap number 1. Effectively, after limping around for a couple more laps, realized he could go no further. In the GT3s, another impressive drive for Sean Campbell, but as we mentioned, the gap behind starting to be closed on down. Ryan Otis again adds to the tally of podiums, finishes in front of Joshua Chin after Miguel Vigo went missing in action. Christopher Hill, Carlos Villa, 4th and 5th. Chase Wilson, the best of the AMs, with Marquez and Tucker separating him from Chris Reagan, 2nd in class. Tyler Graff on debut in the GT3s comes across the line 10th in the combined classifications. Brian Bennett, Travis Jägerlainer for the Synergy Motorsports crew, 11th and 12th in front of Craig Forsyth, with Trevor Malone 3rd in the AM class. Also the final car scored 1 lap down, with Drew White, Creighton Carter, the final of the finishing GT3 machines. Vigo Staropoli, Herrick Morhart, amongst those that did not get to the end, and some major surprise names to be included in that count. As ever, we'll get ready to chat with some of the drivers in our post-race coverage, brought to you by Butt Kicker. What an enthralling race we just witnessed in the Gomez Sim Industry Grand Prix of Fuji, presented by Arena TV. And while we wait for Phil Krause to join us in HyperX Victory Lane, let's quickly dial up Graham Sanders and have a quick chat with him about what was an eventful 90 minutes, Graham. A couple of issues with traffic, it looked like it wasn't the most easy race rather, to work your way through there. But talk to us about today's race at Fuji.
Yeah, that was a interesting race. First of all, huge congrats to Philip. He nailed the strategy and was really fast through traffic. So big, awesome job to him. But it was first stint was pretty easy going. I gained a little bit of time on the cars behind. Second stint, gained some time on Austin, and I didn't really notice how quickly Philip was catching. He was getting really lucky with traffic. And then the third stint, my few outlaps weren't very good, and it really allowed Philip to get right up there with me when he came out, and I just had nothing for him. I completely toasted my front, so he was the deserving driver for sure.
Well, I like to hear the breakdown in your perspective as well, especially through the 3 different phases of the race. But I guess let's talk a little bit about 2 weeks from today, when we make our way on over to the Canadian Tire Motorsports Park. What are you expecting there?
Nothing short of chaos, because there's going to be 15 of us in 20-something GT3s, and it's going to be a melee. So I'm looking forward to it, but it's going to be intense.
Well, you had the benefit of runoff today. You're not going to have that, unfortunately, in 2 weeks' time. Congratulations on second, Graham. Looking forward to seeing you out there at Mosport.
Thanks, Arjuna.
Always great to chat with the Hydro Race Geodesic Racing team. Let's make our way over, though, to HyperX Victory Lane, where Phil Krause is standing by. Phil, Graham was just talking to us about how you nailed the strategy. What was going through your mind as you saw the green flag, though, and the potential 3 and 4 wide that we had?
Survival, really. Yeah, on the strategy front, I thought I had the right strategy for sure. And when I came out of the pits, I second-guessed myself a little bit because he was right there, and I was on popsicle stick tires. I tried to hold him back as best as I could there, but then the fresher tires as we went on definitely came good.
This is 2 victories this season for you, and 2 victories in some rather crazy races. Seems to be a bit of a trend building, Phil, which I guess bodes quite well for you going over to Mosport, which I think we are expecting to be quite nutty.
I like the crazy tracks. I mean, Mosport might be a little too crazy for me. That'll be interesting for sure. Some of the sends you'll see in the final sector with the GTPs on the GT3s, I do not envy those GT3 drivers. I'll say that outright.
The purveyor of sends, Phil Krause, already forewarning the GT3 cars 2 weeks before the sends even happen. Congratulations, Phil, on the win. We'll see you over at Mosport.
Yep, cheers, Arjuna.
So Phil Krause enjoyed a strategy battle and then a wheel-to-wheel battle, while Sean Campbell initially had a choo-choo train behind before he slowly started to stretch his legs. Sean, looked like you got challenged a little bit in the first stint there, or were you just biding your time and saving some fuel?
I mean, no, yeah, no, it was a challenge at the start because I was trying to pull away, and then I noticed it's not gonna happen, so we started fuel saving really heavy to potentially get the jump in the pits. Because it happened to Watkins, Glenn, you saw with Josh, I believe, where as soon as somebody pits, you either have to stop fuel saving or you have to pit with him because he gained loads of time from doing that. So that was the plan up until LMDHs came through and kind of gave me a fair stroke of luck, and I gained some time and was able to pull away.
Got it. We'll talk to the LMDHs. Less luck to go your way moving forward. We've talked about the Canadian Tire Motorsports Park coming up next. I'm wondering what you think about that and Monza coming up next, because those are two races where I think traffic management going to be more important than potentially raw pace out there on track.
Yeah, I think Monza might be another one of the fuel savings, but Motorsport I'm kind of scared of, because that is your fate is entirely up to the hands of the LMDHs there. Like, you can avoid it, but you'll lose a lot of time, and I don't know. It's going to be kind of scary, but it's a fun track when you're driving around it, so I'm excited for that.
Phil Krause has already apologized for the sends that the LMDHs will make, so 2 weeks from today, I'm sure you'll get a sense of how big those sends will be. Congratulations, Sean. 7 wins in a row.
Thanks.
Surely that is Lionheart history as well. We'll chat with Chase Wilson, the winner in the AMs, and Chase, another rather impressive run for you up through the field in that AM car. Talk to us about what you saw out there at Fuji.
It was a really great race. I think everyone raced really strong and competitive. I just don't seem to have the pace for those guys that are ahead of me. So in the Twisted Racing car, it was just trying to hit my lap numbers, try to keep the tires cool, and hopefully make it to the next pit stop and finish the race.
Talk to us about how you're thinking through strategy, because you're one of the drivers that did the slightly shorter stop at the start and then ended up doing a slightly longer stop in the second stint as well, just making sure you're a little bit safe and conservative. Are you just trying to make sure that there's no slip-ups after what was a rather chaotic round at Watkins Glen for you?
Yeah, and just keeping the tires under control. I was really struggling double stinting the tires, doing that longer stint and then a short one at the end, and so I was just focusing on keeping the incident points down, trying to get the bonus point and getting to the end clean. I gave up quite a bit of time to, I believe it was Hill and Via, and I was hoping that having the tires at the end would allow me to catch back up to them, but they had my number today, and they raced a great race with a great strategy. Did
you get the bonus point?
I believe I did.
There you go. Chase Wilson, not just a fast driver in AM, a clean driver in AM as well. Congratulations, Chase. We'll see you over at Mosport.
Thank you, guys.
Always good to have a chat with not just our winners in HyperX Victory Lane, but of course with Graham Sanders as well, and get his perspective on how he saw that race playing out. And boy, was that a crazy one. But we now go to what, Andrew, we think is going to be the craziest race of the season. The BMW Performance Center Grand Prix of Mosport, presented by Butt Kicker.
Yeah, you've heard it from the drivers, you heard it from the commentators, but you're going to see it in 2 weeks' time on June 24th. The Sportscar Series goes north of the border to Mosport, and this tight, twisting course is going to be home to chaos, and I can't wait to see it.
And of course, after that, we talked about it quickly with Sean Campbell as well, but we make our way over to Monza to wrap up the first half of the season with what he thinks might be a bit of a fuel-saving race. That's going to be an interesting one. And then the back half of the year, we run our way in towards 2024, Night Lights of Daytona to crown a champion off. What a second half of the season that is. I mean, I thought the first half was great, but I'm looking seriously at the second half and thinking there isn't a track that isn't going to produce a thriller.
Absolutely. Every single one of those tracks on the second half of the schedule, whether it's Formula One or IndyCar or sports car racing, all of them have the pedigree, all of them have those classic moments that you think of. So I can't wait to see what happens as we get into the second half too.
Well, that's just a look at what's ahead, but of course, plenty of racing still to come before we get over our way to the World Center of Racing to crown a champion on January the 15th. Don't forget, if you want to learn a little bit more about the Lionheart Racing Series, the 3 competitions the sanctioning body puts forward, or its partners, head on over to lionheartracingseries.com. And don't forget, social media, your place to learn and keep up to date with everything going on inside of the virtual paddock. Of course, the next time we are back in action will be over at the Canadian Tire Motorsports Park, but of course as well, don't forget that the Lionheart Retro Series building up to its next race as the drivers make their way over to Fuji as well for the HyperX Grand Prix of Fuji on July the 20th. For now, it's time to say goodbye. For Andrew Kinsella alongside myself, Arjuna Kankipati, thank you so much for joining us for the latest round of the Butt Kicker Sports Car Series. We'll see you from the Canadian Tire Motorsports Park, where things are bound to be crazy. Let's see how things go for our winners tonight, Phil Krause, Sean Campbell, and Chase Wilson.